Goodbye, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. It looks like the iconic attraction at Disney Hollywood Studios might finally be changing. Hello everybody, welcome. A few months ago, I reported out on the possibility that the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror had a retheme incoming. And now we've got some new details that have emerged that seemingly support this massively unwelcome change. With all the recent changes to Muppet Vision, the Muppets Courtyard, and the iconic rock and roller coaster over at Hollywood Studios, it seems now that Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is now on the chopping block. As you know, Muppet Vision 3D is now formally being replaced by some sort of new Monsters, Inc. show. The entire area is finally closed. We lost Muppets a few weeks ago. It is now closed, it is gone, it is shut down, and they have started construction on the brand new Monsters, Inc. land coming to that theme park. As part of that very same announcement, they got a lot of people excited, but a lot of people upset. They also announced that the rock and roller coaster starring Aerosmith will now be rethemed to a Muppets version of Rock and Roller Coaster starring Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, which I quite honestly am not super happy about or excited for. I'm not overly upset about Muppets going away in the Muppets Courtyard because Monsters, Inc. does sound exciting to me, but I am not super jazzed about losing the Aerosmith and the sort of rock and roll feel of that attraction and replacing it with Muppets. But more importantly, what I'm not excited about is the lack of and the seeming elimination of original ideas at Disney. And this seems to be their strategy going forward. Bob Iger has come out on record and talks very clearly about the successes that they've had at their parks, and bringing IPs into the parks has been where they see the biggest success and the most profit. So it seems like their strategy going forward is all IPs all the time. And if you're wondering what is IP, what is this guy talking about, why does he keep talking about IPs, I'm talking about brands, big name brands, things that are recognizable. Things like Star Wars, things like Avatar and Pandora, Indiana Jones. And if you look at all the acquisitions they've made, they're doing this specifically because they want all the IPs that are in their parks to be owned specifically by Disney. Universal, on the other hand, if you look at their strategy, they partner with, they acquire, they license lots of different IPs that they don't necessarily own, and they bring them into their parks. Simpsons is a good example of that. That is now actually owned by Fox. And so Simpsons is an IP that Universal licenses and uses, but technically now Disney owns. So Disney, on the other hand, has said, you know what? We only want IPs that we own in our theme parks. So you look at things like Muppets. Disney purchased Muppets in 2004, and they've been using it ever since. Avatar, Pandora, Disney purchased them in 2019. Star Wars, they purchased that in 2012. Indiana Jones also purchased in 2012. Marvel purchased 2009. Pixar was purchased by Disney in 2006. So again, you're seeing constant IPs being brought in, but only IPs that they own. So it is very clear that Disney's strategy is IP, but only owned IPs, and see you later, original ideas. We don't really care about that so much, so it's going to be IPs going forward, which is kind of a loss, and I'm pretty sad about that. Now, if you even look at all the rethemes they've been doing, they've been systematically removing IPs that were not Disney owned or attractions that were original ideas and replacing them with Disney owned IPs. Maelstrom, original idea, replaced with Frozen. Tough to Be a Bug, replaced by Zootopia. Splash Mountain, replaced by Tiana's Bayou. Ellen's Universe of Energy, replaced with Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. Living Seas, now Living Seas with Nemo. The Great Movie Ride, and now Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And now, of course, Rock and Roller Coaster with Aerosmith is now Muppets. You also look at things like the Disney's California Adventure Twilight Zone Tower of Terror attraction, rethemed to Guardians of the Galaxy. Because again, Disney does not own Twilight Zone, the IP. You look at things like Tokyo Disney Sea, they have a Tower of Terror there as well, but it is not branded Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. It is just Tower of Terror, and it is its own storyline. So with all these changes that have recently happened, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is the last remaining non-Disney IP in all of their parks. It is the last person standing. Walt Disney World in Florida and Disneyland Paris are the only two Twilight Zone Tower of Terror attractions that have the Twilight Zone theme on them. All the other ones have been rebranded or just a generic theme. So Twilight Zone is owned by Paramount. And you may say, well, maybe Disney will purchase Paramount. Maybe they're going to buy it. Nope, not going to buy it. Most likely not, because they had their chance to purchase it. It just recently went up for sale and Disney did not purchase it. Skydance Media purchased it instead. So it is very unlikely that it's going to change hands anytime soon. It was just purchased and they had their shot and they didn't take it. Which means it's all but pretty much guaranteed that Twilight Zone is going bye-bye. See you later, Tower of Terror, it's going to be changing. So I want to talk a little bit about what it could be changing to and some more evidence that is now showing that this is very likely happening and maybe sooner rather than later. So let's get right into what it could potentially be. First and foremost, the very obvious choice is they could change it to Muppets. Yes, believe it or not, a Muppets Tower of Terror is not off the chopping block. I know it sounds crazy, but let me walk you through it. So here's what could happen. First of all, Rock and Roller Coaster changing to Muppets, right there in that space near Tower of Terror. Right behind that, the old Lightning McQueen Academy is now a Disney Villains show. That particular space back there, the Disney Villains show, is meant to be temporary. This Disney Villains show was never meant to be permanent. I believe they've been using this as a test ground to see which villains are popular, what's working well, what's not working, so that as they're developing their plans for the Disney Villains land over in Magic Kingdom, they have information sort of feeding the designs and the approach to that land. Which means this Disney Villains themed show is going to be going away. Now, I did hear rumor, surprisingly, that Disney was fairly shocked at how popular Muppets was when that sort of went away, and they weren't expecting so much turnout for the last day of people being there and so much passion about it. I don't know why they were surprised. It just makes me feel like Disney is so out of touch with their fans that this shocked them. I'm sorry that this has shocked you. I'm really so confused by that. But apparently that shock has made them think, maybe we should use the Lightning McQueen Academy or something to maybe bring Muppets or some new modern version of it over into that space and even potentially create a Muppets land, a Muppets area, that whole area with Rock and Roller Coaster, the area there with the Lightning McQueen Academy. It's pretty sizable. They could turn that into a land. And what else is right next to that? The Tower of Terror. It's very easily connectable. You could connect it through the treeway. There's lots of trees and things. You could connect those two very easily without even leaving that space. Or you could go through the current sort of exit from Rock and Roller Coaster over to Tower of Terror. It's right there. You could conceivably expand that into some sort of Muppets Tower of Terror and make it a whole land over there. We even have some scary haunted mansion, haunted house versions of Muppets that are out there that they could easily borrow from a thematic perspective, and they could make it work. Now, I will say this is probably not a likely scenario. I am just hoping against hope that this is not in the cards. So I'm going to just set that aside for now and say that's not happening. So what else could happen? The next most likely thing could be easily Guardians of the Galaxy retheme. They've already done it over in DCA. They really destroyed the theming of it. They turned it to Guardians of the Galaxy. I've ridden the Guardians of the Galaxy tower over there. I'm not a huge fan. I don't think it's nearly as good as Twilight Zone Tower of Terror in Walt Disney World. It's like a 1 out of 10. Twilight Zone Tower of Terror 10, Guardians 1. I also think that the theming and the visual aesthetic of a Guardians tower just would not work in that space. That is an iconic attraction. So the most likeliest outcome of where they're going, and I have some evidence that I want to present to showcase that, is simply dropping the Twilight Zone portion of Tower of Terror and just retheming it Tower of Terror. Here's the thing, this is an iconic ride. It's been there since 1994, 5 years after Hollywood Studios opened. It's largely considered the icon of the park. If you look at the guide maps, you look at anything that has to do with Hollywood Studios, Tower of Terror is the icon for the park. You have the Epcot Ball, Spaceship Earth, you've got Cinderella's Castle, you've got the Animal Kingdom Tree of Life, the giant tree. Hollywood Studios is literally the Tower of Terror. It's not the Chinese theater. It's not the old water tower. I mean, it's literally the Tower of Terror. So changing it to something dramatically different would be a colossal mistake. Colossal. Now, just this week, we just got new information that a brand new Tower of Terror movie is still in the works. This movie has Scarlett Johansson at the helm of the movie. This was first announced, I believe, back in like 2021. And since then, it has sort of fallen off the radar. This was announced with a slew of other attraction-based movies that Disney was going to be rolling out. You know, the market has cooled, they've had some duds lately, and I think things have sort of slowed down. But just this week, it has renewed focus. Scarlett Johansson coming out of the woodwork with her Jurassic World movie that is just premiering, and she's now talking about this new Tower of Terror movie and that it is starting to shape up. They have scripts being written, and there's a renewed focus on bringing this to life. There was one other big attempt at a Tower of Terror movie back in 1997 starring Steve Guttenberg. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time. Old Police Academy days. Steve Guttenberg, that movie bombed. The colossal bomb. But that movie did not have a Twilight Zone tie-in to it. It was Tower of Terror, but it was not Twilight Zone themed. So this new movie that is being written, they are trying to find the right story for it. Scarlett Johansson essentially has said, the plot and everything of Tower of Terror, Twilight Zone Tower, is pretty thin. And so like coming up with a new plot has been the hard part. It is most surely not going to be Twilight Zone related. This is going to be a Tower of Terror that is not themed Twilight Zone for the movie. So why would they do that? Here's why. Because if they can get a hit under their belt, if they can release a new Tower of Terror movie with a new storyline that will work for that attraction and still feels thematically relevant, that doesn't have Twilight Zone on it, and it's a hit and people get energized about it, they can rebrand Twilight Zone Tower of Terror to just Tower of Terror, or whatever this movie ends up being, rebranding it to something much more generic like that, and hopefully people won't get too upset and they'll actually get excited about the Tower of Terror attraction changing. And that gives them exactly what they want, which is to remove the Twilight Zone IP, the last one standing, and get it all to Disney-owned IPs only. That is a big thing. So I'm telling you, that's the plan. That's where it's going. There you have it. Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, retheme, very likely incoming. Now, I won't say this is confirmed. A lot of people start freaking out on my videos like, this guy, it's not confirmed. I haven't heard anything about it. I take the information that I have, the data, the things I hear, and I speculate, and I talk about what most likely is going to happen. And I'm usually correct. So the good news is, if this does go forward and they can land the script, it does sound positive for Tower of Terror that it will at least retain its current aesthetic and same feel without like dramatically changing it to something like Muppets or Guardians. It'll still be kind of a spooky, scary experience, maybe a similar storyline, but just without the Twilight Zone piece of it. So what do you think? Are you gonna miss Twilight Zone Tower of Terror? Are you gonna miss that theming when it goes away, if it goes away? Love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think? What are you hearing? What do you project is gonna happen? Love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this content. Until I see you next time, the noble way is the easy way. Bye-bye, everybody.